Hmm.
Hmm.
Strange. You know, we're having kind of one of those tech days where like little tech challenges are happening on several levels. So be patient with us because for some reason we're having a little bit of an issue with Facebook. Let's try this again.
What if I were to suggest that you play a key role in the awakening world? And that you are watching this because you have heard the call. We can start right now by opening our hearts and minds. Welcome to the awakening world.
Evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'm Love Coach Scott Catamas, and welcome to the Awakening World. Welcome to 2024. And it's going to be quite a beautiful year for us. And I want to acknowledge we're having a little bit of some tech issues tonight. And I think maybe it might have been challenging for some of you to get in. It appears that Zoom may have changed some of their settings. So I'm glad, though, that you all made it. And we have a really amazing show tonight. We have two extraordinary guests that are two of the world's greatest authors and teachers of relationship. We've got Katherine Woodward Thomas with us. And we've had Katherine on the show before, but I think it's been about a year, Katherine, since the last time you were with us.
I think it has, but I'm thrilled to be here right at the top of 2024. I
It's,
feel honored to start the year off with you and John.
no, likewise. And he made it. Here he is, one of our favorites. John Gray is back with us. Welcome, John. And I
Yeah,
think
hi. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm really happy to be with you. Happy to be with you, Katherine. It's a delight for me to join you for the new year. This is an exciting time for all of us to put our intentions out there to create a successful, happy, loving year.
you know, a great mentor of mine said, life is relationship. If you want to change your life, change your relationships. And so that's why I thought starting the new year with both of you. And I learned from Katherine, this is the first time you've shared a stage together. So I'm imagining it's going to be quite a dynamic conversation.
Thank you. Well, I love how you're coattailing me with John, and you're saying two of the world's most well-known relationship experts. I feel like I'm just sliding in on John's coattails with that one, because
Oh,
everyone
no,
knows that John is king.
John is king.
John is king. Happy to be your
Katherine,
queen.
you covered all the bases. You
Yes, you
taught us
did.
how to find the right one, and then
That's
you taught us
right.
how to consciously uncouple. I mean, you got
Graciously bring closure in a way that leaves your heart at peace. That's right. Thank you.
It's a good balance because I always focus on how to stay together. But I also know some people are just not ready to be in a relationship, or circumstances are just not right for them. So I tend to have my focus, you have your focus. And, you know, when it comes to starting new relationships, and I'm sure you know this as well, if we can't reflect on our past relationship with a positive feeling, we tend to be attracted to the same situation. I think most people listening know there's such a thing as patterns. And if your pattern is to feel like you were mistreated, and certainly you have been mistreated, but when we can't see our role in it, or we can't find forgiveness. And why I mentioned finding our role in the problem is because it's so easy to find forgiveness when you realize that you're part of the problem. It's hard to find forgiveness when you feel it's all underlying all the other person's fault. And let's imagine that for a moment it is all the other person's fault. Well, it's your fault to staying in that relationship because the signs were there long before.
We want to use that time of being broken open to really transform at the deepest level. It's actually the biggest opportunity we have to really transform those core patterns, because it's almost like we are held captive by the pain that we're in. And the pain can be heartbreak, or it can be anger, or it can be depression, or just the collapse into false meaning, like I'll never find love, no one will ever love me, I'll never have love like that again. And it's so painful that there's nowhere else to go but to grow. So
Yeah.
that's the opportunity. And you wrote a beautiful book on heartbreak too. I used your book as research for conscious uncoupling.
Oh, thank you. That book is called Mars and Venus Starting Over. I've had a lot of heartbreak in my life. I was married to my wife, Bonnie, for 34 years before she passed. Now, I think that was the biggest heartbreak in my entire life. I've had a lot of losses, a lot of deaths. But before I married Bonnie, 35 years ago, 40 years ago, I was married before for 2 years by someone that maybe many of you know, Barbara DeAngelis. We taught a class together called Making Love Work. And just imagine when I found out she was in love with somebody else, I said, I can't go teach classes if I'm not in a successful relationship. And she says, I'm not going to go either. But I went ahead and I did it. And as you mentioned, these moments are the greatest growth opportunities. And I remember I had 7 seminars planned around the country. These were 3-day weekends. You know, that's a big deal to get people to come together, 100 people for a 3-day weekend. And I was terrified walking up on that stage. I actually had an assistant hold my hand. It helped me understand when a person's vulnerable, holding their hand, you don't have to say anything, can be so nurturing, so supportive. But I was so scared. And here I had the audience there, and I said, I'm here. You know, my wife isn't here because we're separated. And I'm sure you're expecting us to be here together. And if you want to leave, I certainly understand that. If you want your money back, of course, I'll give you the money back. It's not what you expected. And if you want to ask me any questions, I'll answer any questions because I'm always an open book. And somebody raised their hand. This was in Cincinnati. And they said, well, how can we trust you if your relationship's falling apart? And you know, those moments when your heart is open, you're easily divinely inspired by the words just came out of me. Well, who told you about the seminar? And he said, my friend, so-and-so. Are they here? And he said, yes. Well, if you can't trust me, maybe you can trust what they said. And it was a little bit longer than that, but he said, okay. And they all stayed. Everybody was happy. The course was great. And to me, I did that 7 times at that very vulnerable time. And after that, I don't think I had ever had speaking anxiety again. It's kind of like having walked through hell. I kept going, and I don't have anxiety anymore. I used to have anxiety before an event. And once I got going, it was fine. But that's all gone away. It was such a healing. And it's not just going to those events, although that was important, to not let fear hold me back. Because when you let fear hold you back, you're making the fear more real, as opposed to false evidence appearing real. We make it real by letting our fears control us.
Very powerful. I actually had a similar experience in the way that conscious uncoupling began in the world, because I was just hosting a group that had traveled all the way to LA. Some people came from other countries to come become calling in the one coaches. And that was the week that Mark and I decided to separate.
Same thing. Couldn't be more devastating.
But I started to talk about conscious uncoupling and how we were separating. And people were so moved by the commitment that we had and how we were going to navigate this. And also really looking at what the reality is. We're all coming in with this happily ever after myth that we're holding ourselves and each other accountable to. But the reality of our time is that most people are slated to have 2 to 3 significant relationships in their lifetime. And so many of us are going to go through these times of transition. And not every relationship is going to last a lifetime. And when happily ever after was created as a myth, it was about 400 years ago. And the lifespan was less than 40. And there were very few options in life. So it was a very different time when that archetypal, goal came into our consciousness. So just like we update our diets or we update our child rearing practices and how we educate our children, we need to update how we actually separate, because our biology is still caught up in this very primitive, fight or flight, we're going to die if that person leaves us. It's kind of what would have happened 1,000 years ago. If we had wandered away from our tribe, we probably would have died back then. So we still have those same feelings. So consciously doing this, using that heartbreak to really navigate your way through to the highest and the best, to forgive yourself, to outgrow old patterns, to say, I will never again betray myself by settling for less or dimming down, and making an amends to yourself moving forward. And then taking the high road, all of those things make sure that you do not get stuck in that prolonged grief. Because to me, prolonged grief is just false meaning. We're taking the breakup as like evidence that somehow we're not lovable or we'll always be alone. So we have to push back, become conscious and push back and assert what's really true.
One way of
Loving what both of
understanding
you
that.
are saying, and I want to just come in for a quick minute. And you two are right off, like I knew you would be, off to a great conversation. One of the things that I think is that I want to riff on in terms of what you're talking about heartbreak, and my wife died in my arms, so I've also had that experience.
All right.
What's interesting is the best-selling poet in America for many years now is Rumi, a 12th century, probably gay Islamic mystic, is the best-selling poet in America. Why is
I'd say he was celibate.
this? So there you have it.
Put that point out there. And historically, when men were more on their female side, they had higher estrogen than most men. Estrogen's the female hormone. They were the monks. They were the celibates. That was the journey for them. Sex was not a part of their life because they were more balanced on their feminine side and their masculine side, which is what gives rise to creativity. And so there's a dynamic there that if you go to the tribes in the Amazon and various places, you'll see there as well, is that when somebody is born with more on a male is more feminine, he will become a shaman. Most shamans have that access to male and female, but they don't practice sex.
Absolutely. Two quick things. One is what I brought up Rumi is that he teaches us about the pathway of the broken heart. And that's where the light comes through. And I think it's so important for us to realize that we are going to have heartbreak in our lives, but that is where we can find our connection to what Rumi called the eternal beloved. Also,
that was exactly the quote I was going to quote. You did it beautifully. And sometimes I tell my students, they often say, I feel like I'm here in this world for a mission and a purpose. Why did God put me in this really dysfunctional family? And a nice phrase there is God places his angels or her angels in the darkest places because that's where the light is needed. And so much of our trauma from our childhood, and some people may have the same experiences, but they don't feel it as trauma. It's the sensitive souls feel the trauma the most. And in dealing with that trauma later in life, allows us to develop the skills to heal trauma. And as we're healing that trauma on a very practical level, in my mind, we're helping to heal the trauma of the world, because we are a collective. There is a oneness there. And some people will not have the consciousness on their own to let go of that stuff or even to be aware of that stuff. Although right now there is the big awakening. We're all starting to wake up.
That's why we call our show The Awakening World. And speaking of the awakening world, we actually always start our shows with music. And you guys got off to such a dynamic start, so, which is awesome. Two quick things, everybody. Zoom has changed some of their settings. So if you want to see it on speaker view, make sure you go into the upper right-hand corner on your computer where it says view and select speaker as opposed to gallery. I do have it on speaker view, but apparently some of you are seeing it only on gallery. So you guys have the power. And we're going to turn the power over to our beloved brother Omashar for our first musical number of the evening. Take it away, beloved brother Omashar.
Happy New Year, everybody. Wow, we are awakening, as John said. Yes, yes. And so everything we're talking about tonight will probably in 2 years' time, hopefully it'll be a moot point, because we'll be also open and in love with each other, that, we'll all be coupled. Anyway, here's a song that I wrote, and it was actually in between a heartbreak and a heart opening, and it's called Until You, but it popped in as a relevant song to start off this evening with. So here's a nice background, and let's go. What could I ever do without you in my life? It would seem so unreal. I'm glad it's not true. What could I ever feel if you left me alone? I'm so happy you're here, that you came through. I am one love with you. You're part of my life. Don't think that I'm crazy, 'cause I feel so alive in this new situation. I am never alone. You gave me your heart, and now I call it my home. Show me a better way to get on with my life. I wasn't always this real until you. I know the constant change that we need for our souls. There is always a way for us to get through. I am one love with you. You're part of my life. Don't think that I'm crazy, 'cause I feel so alive in this new situation. I am never alone. You gave me your heart, and now I call it my home. I am one love with you. You're part of my life. Don't think that I'm crazy, 'cause I feel so alive in this new situation. I am never alone. You gave me your heart, and now I call it my home.
Let's all give New Year's Eve or New Year's New Year twinkle.
New Year's Omashar.
Thank you, Omashar. That was really, really fun.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. See you
How
later.
gifted you are.
Omashar, by the way, just so you know, is with us for all of our shows. He's our house musical artist, and we love this man very, very much. All right, we're going to go back to our amazing guests, Katherine Woodward Thomas and John Gray. And we right off the bat have a question, which is kind of following on what we do. What are the steps for healing a broken heart and trusting in love again?
Oh, beautiful. John, do you mind if I go first on that one?
Ladies first.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
very traditional.
So there's in conscious uncoupling, there's actually 5 steps. And the first thing we need to do is to find some freedom and some spaciousness around the very big emotions that are kind of taking us over and in many ways taking us out. I don't know if you've ever had one of those crash and burn breakups where your heart is just shattered. It can affect you physically, it affects you psychologically, it affects you spiritually in a way that you can't even trust life in some ways sometimes. So you're pretty, decimated. You can be pretty decimated. And of course, there's lots of, variation on that theme. So the ability to kind of hold and contain your own emotions is one of the tools that I give to people right off the bat, to just be able to be present with yourself from the deeper part of you that knows that you're going to be okay, that you will get through this experience, that you're not going to die from this, and to be able to just hold your feelings. There's a thing that psychologists do called affect labeling, which is the ability to just even ask yourself, what is it you're feeling? And just identify the feeling and send love to the part of you that's having that experience, so that you can just begin to regulate yourself. So you get yourself out of intensity of the reactivation of trauma. And for most of us, it's old trauma that's getting reactivated again, so that we can just trust ourselves to not act out in destructive ways or in ways that are going to humiliate us. So that's the first thing we do. But then you want to start a process of being able to craft a breakup narrative that's holistic in nature and not just victimized, which is not an easy thing to do, because when you're traumatized, you're going to want to tell the story to try and put the pieces together, right? All the things you should have said, understanding the sign, or maybe that was a lie, and you're kind of ruminating and going over and over the story. But usually the story has a victimized slant. You're trying to come to terms with what has been done to you. So in conscious uncoupling, we really help you to step back and take stock, as John was talking about before, of your part in it, the decisions that you are making, the choices that you are making, and to take responsibility for those, and to actually look to see what you will never do again, or what you will always do from this moment forward. So you're actually setting an intention for yourself to outgrow who you were when you were in that relationship, and to become a stronger version of yourself, a healthier version of yourself, someone who you can trust yourself and love. When you've had your heart broken, it's not men or women you don't trust. And it's not that you don't trust love, you don't trust yourself. So that's the main relationship that needs to be repaired. So that's a couple of things from conscious uncoupling, but I'll let John step in because I know he has a lot to say on this too.
Oh, I thought everything you said was perfect. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, a little while ago, I wanted to mention why, just to add context to this, is you talked about how a loss, we both have, some of us have experienced a death, which is, to someone you're deeply bonded to, is massively devastating. And for me, with